The Ku Klux Klan is the oldest racist terrorist group in the United States.
I don't believe in segregation, I believe in slavery.
Created after the Civil War, the Invisible Empire transformed into a violent militia bent on terrorizing freed former slaves. The anti-black, anti-Semitic, and anti-Catholic Klan had enlisted more than 4 million members in the 1920s before disappearing. After the Second World War, the Invisible Empire re-emerged. Its goal had not changed: to defend white supremacy by any and all means.
Klansmen from the Ku Klux Klan!
At the beginning of the 1950s, American society was more prosperous than ever before. Consumption, growth, and well-being were key words in the world's leading economic power. Though the country had won the Second World War and served as a symbol of liberty, racial segregation continued to exist in the American South, 80 years after the official abolition of slavery. Black Americans had no access to anything, not to well-paid jobs or health care or quality education. The doors leading to prosperity were closed to them.
When I was growing up as a child here in Birmingham, as an African American, you couldn't go to a restaurant and sit down and have a meal. You couldn't try on clothes at a department store. When my mother, for example, attempted to buy shoes for us, we could not try on shoes. She would have to take a piece of paper and trace our feet and present that to the attendant at the store, and they would use that to try and match us up with the correct size of shoes.
What happened is my friend had lived in Mississippi, and his neighbor was white, but they lived along, but the dogs could play together, okay? But the children could not.
The segregationist system was beginning to wobble, however. May 17, 1954 was a major turning point. That day, the Supreme Court declared racial segregation in public schools to be unconstitutional. From now on, schools could no longer refuse to teach black children. This decision enraged Southern states. The Klan, which had 4 million members in the 1920s, had practically disappeared. The threat of desegregation revived it. The Invisible Empire once again drew in thousands of supporters wearing the pointed hood.
They want to throw white children and colored children into the melting pot of integration, out of which will come a conglomerated, mulatto, mongrel class of people. Both races will be destroyed in such a movement.
African Americans began to rise up. The civil rights movement was seeking justice. In December 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus to a white passenger. Martin Luther King launched his campaign for nonviolent civil disobedience to obtain equality between blacks and whites. The movement was pacifist, but the police response was not at all. African Americans were calling for the end of segregation with all of their might. But neither Klan members nor Southern politicians were prepared to give up their supremacy. The governor of Alabama, George Wallace, was representative of this reactionary mindset.
In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Despite all the obstacles, on August 28, 1963, more than 300,000 Americans, black and white, marched on Washington to protest for a new kind of society. It was a unique moment in the history of the United States. Martin Luther King shared his dream for America.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
The country refused to move on. In the South, supporters of white supremacy were on the defensive. Their response? Radicalization. On September 15, 1963, 2 weeks after the March on Washington, a bomb went off in the 16th Street Baptist Church at the center of a black neighborhood in Birmingham, Alabama.
I played clarinet in the church orchestra. I remember the room began to shake. The lights went out, a lot of dust, a lot of smoke. Now, we had no idea what was going on. We just sort of looked at each other and ran.
The church itself was devastated. Every window but one was broken. Pieces of masonry weighing 20 pounds were ripped from the facade and thrown across the street.
That Sunday morning, more than a dozen sticks of dynamite blasted through the southern side of the church. The shockwave was felt around the neighborhood.
Many were bleeding, a lot of them were crying, and almost everybody were looking for their parents and siblings and loved ones. Later that day, and we started to get information bit by bit. We found out that there were 27 people taken to the hospital, and there were 4 people dead.
4 girls doing catechism were killed. Carol Robinson, Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, and Denise McNair. They were between 11 and 14 years old.
Four precious lives were taken. Addie, Denise, Carol, Cynthia. My friends, who were basically 3 rooms down from where I was, lost their lives. They found them under the rubble.
One of the little girls, Denise McNair, who was 11 years old, her grandfather owned a shop right across from the church. The explosive effect of the bomb damaged all the shops around the area. And he had a clock on the wall, and the clock stopped. The time stands still, and it stood still at that moment in Birmingham, Alabama, when those 4 little girls were killed.
Birmingham had come to be known as Bombingham because of how frequent attacks had become since the 1950s. But this time, the location and the victims' youth shocked the country. The FBI and Alabama authorities quickly identified the suspected perpetrators. 4 members of the local KKK were questioned, including Robert Chambliss, known as Dynamite Bob.
Very shortly after the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, the FBI developed information which turned out to be true about who had actually carried out the bombing. They sent this file back to Washington, to the FBI headquarters, but the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, refused to forward that file to prosecutors in the Department of Justice. So it lay there for years and years and years and years. So in effect, FBI agents in the field knew who the killers were, knew who the bombers were, but because of the leadership of the FBI at the time, none of that information was prosecuted until decades later.
Robert Chambliss, who committed the bombing, was convicted of possession of dynamite. He would do just 4 months in prison. The other suspects were not prosecuted. J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, did everything he could to block the investigations. He had chosen his side. In his view, the main danger to the country was the civil rights activists, whom he considered communists. Martin Luther King was being monitored. Investigations into good, patriotic white people in the Klan could wait.
The fact that no one was convicted right away, and again, having the knowledge that they probably knew who did it, it seemingly was business as usual for the way African-American people were treated.
That is, unfortunately, there's a lot of truth to the fact that the Klan felt like they had a green light to commit violence, especially in some places. The Klan felt like they could be as violent as they wanted and nothing would be done to them.
This impunity encouraged violence, and the Klan had its preferred targets, promoters of racial equality. In June 1964, 3 civil rights activists, 2 of them Jewish and 1 African American, went missing. While driving through the city of Meridian, Mississippi, they were stopped for speeding and released. The local deputy sheriff, Cecil Price, was the last person to see them.
They paid the fine and I released them. They escorted them to their car and they got in their car and left. And I asked them which direction they were going. They said they were going to Meridian, Mississippi. And that's the last time we saw any of them.
No one had heard from Andrew Goodman, James Chaney, and Michael Schwerner since then. An alert went out. Mississippi had a reputation, the most racist state in America and the heartland of the Klan. On June 23rd, 48 hours after their disappearance, their car was found.
The car was empty. It had been burned out totally. It was examined closely by a forensics expert who could not find any evidence related to the crime.
J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, called President Lyndon Johnson.
Mr. President, I wanted to let you know we have found the car.
Yeah?
The car was burned, and we do not know yet whether any bodies are inside of the car because of the intense heat.
NBC News presents...
News coverage was nonstop. The victims' families used it to appeal to viewers.
a special report on the 3 workers for civil rights still missing in Mississippi.
We would implore anybody who can help to establish contact with him. We would be grateful to them.
The media took an interest in the new strongman of the KKK, Robert Shelton. Always seen driving his late-model Cadillac, Shelton was an excellent organizer. He managed to bring several Klan factions together within the United Klans of America, which he led. The former tire salesman was now in charge of 30,000 men in 5 states. Full of confidence, the Imperial Wizard appeared more and more in the media.
I have been in consultation with various members and people in the area, and we have come up with some information that satisfies us of the fact that all probability this is just another hoax.
Under pressure from the media, the investigation began moving faster. The FBI became more closely involved.
Immediately, more FBI agents were transferred in. The United States Navy has a small training base near Meridian, and approximately 200 sailors came out with the FBI agents to assist in the search of the area where the car was located.
After that killing, the FBI went south with a lot of agents, and they forced local law enforcement to dredge rivers all over the place. They found lots and lots of bodies that were not the bodies of the murdered civil rights workers, but ultimately they were able to unravel the case.
On August 4th, 1964, after a 45-day investigation, the bodies were finally found in a forest. The FBI managed to get a witness to talk and reveal everything. More than 15 suspects were linked to the plot and arrested. Among them were Samuel Bowers, a local Klan official, but also Sheriff Lawrence Rainey and Cecil Price, who had arrested the 3 activists. The killing was premeditated.
The civil rights workers were in town, and therefore, on their way out of town, they were stopped by the deputy sheriff, and they were released in a very coordinated way, working with the police. Klan members were waiting near the jailhouse. They knew they were going to be released, and they followed them out of town.
They have been directed to follow the sheriff's car out of town. Deputy Sheriff Cecil Price purposely drew them into a trap where several Klansmen led by Edgar Ray Killen were waiting for them.
And there they proceeded to kill all 3 of those civil rights workers. And again, as part of this plot, they had already set up in a premeditated way how to dispose of these bodies. They placed the station wagon that the civil rights workers had been driving in a swamp fairly far away from the site in which they were murdered. And they had bulldozers ready there to have the bodies buried in an earthen dam nearby in the county.
The most remarkable thing was how local law enforcement was essentially the same as the Klan. They were Klansmen, and ultimately they handed these people, they took them out of a local cell where they'd been briefly arrested and detained, and handed them to the Klan, which then dragged them out into the forest and murdered them.
Trial after trial took place. The criminals who arranged the arrests of the activists, committed the murder, and hid the bodies with a bulldozer were repeatedly arrested and released. In Mississippi, white juries rarely or never convict for crimes against black people.
The local sheriff, well, it was really the undersheriff, Cecil Price, you know, an infamous man. When you see Cecil Price when he was first tried and acquitted by a local white jury, he has this terrible grin on his face. You know, he's just laughing at how he's gotten away, literally, with murder.
So a number of people involved in the Freedom Summer murders were brought to trial in the 1960s. Edgar Ray Killen, as the architect of the plot, was tried back then, and he was not convicted basically because there was one particular person on the jury who said, regardless of what the details of the case were, they could not bring themselves to convict a preacher, someone who worked in service of God, for these crimes, and he was set free.
It also points out how hard it was to actually bring the Klan to justice, because the Klan was both the perpetrator and the enforcement agent of the law, and in some cases, the judge and the jury in terms of the crimes that took place in the South.
I would like at this time to call Sheriff Lawrence A. Rainey from Neshoba County to the platform for a statement.
Adding insult to injury, suspects, including Sheriff Lawrence Rainey, were welcomed as guests of honor at Klan meetings during the trials.
No, I was just down here. I've been accused by the FBI, by the Klan and everything, and so I come down today to see the head men and investigate it and see what there was to it. I met some of the best fellows I think are in Alabama and Mississippi and other places.
For a cold-blooded murder, the 17 suspects risked the death penalty or life in prison. In the end, only 7 of them were convicted for a maximum of 6 years.
Thank you.
Let's give him a hand if you're glad he got on this platform. A true great white America.
Nothing seemed to stop Klan violence. Threats, terror, and murders continued to take place. The Klan knew how to indoctrinate its members.
Have you ever seen the pyramid of hate and extremism? Where it's like at the very top of the pyramid is hate, but the very bottom line, like the very bottom pillar of the pyramid is biases. And it slowly builds until it becomes a pillar of hate. They definitely guide you in your hatred, but over the time they grow you, they groom you into hating just about everything.
And remember, the niggers that are giving you all the trouble, white folk, are the educated niggers.
The fact that you hate something, they have an avenue and they'll start to mold you and groom you. It's brainwashing, and it takes a long time to get back from that.
The apostles of hatred openly preached committing crimes.
I got news for nigger. You nigger. We're on the move too. I don't believe in segregation. I believe in slavery.
But in 1965, yet another murder in Alabama began to shake things up. On March 25th, Viola Liuzzo, a white woman activist, accompanied a young black man and fellow demonstrator home. Klansmen spotted the vehicle. They followed it and fired shots into it.
And they got out of the car once they shot into her car to make sure she was dead. Blood was everywhere. Leroy Moulton was a young black fellow who was riding with her, and he flopped his head down, and pretended he was dead. And it was her blood that was all over his head. And when they looked in and they saw, they thought they had killed both of them. So he survived. But I often say that she gave her life, and in the meantime, she saved his life with her blood.
The driver of this car was Mrs. Viola Liuzzo, mother of 5 children. A red and white sedan overtook her car. Several shots were fired. The driverless car veered off the highway and came to a stop at a cattle fence. Mrs. Liuzzo was dead.
This time, the crime was solved quickly. A Klan member and FBI informant happened to be in the perpetrator's car. His name, Gary Thomas Rowe.
This individual reported immediately to the FBI what he had seen, what he had witnessed, And this led to the successful prosecution of the Klansmen involved in her murder.
President Lyndon Johnson announced that the crime had been solved the next day. The Klan had become public enemy #1.
Montgomery, Alabama. So if Klansmen hear my voice today, let it be both an appeal and a warning to get out of the Ku Klux Klan now and return to a decent society before it is too late.
But the invisible empire was indifferent to such threats. At their trial, Viola Liuzzo's murderers got away with it. The all-white jury refused to convict them.
Now present Mr. W.O. Eaton, Mr. Eugene Thomas, and the boy who stood under the battle guns, Collie Leroy Wilkins.
As usual, the Klan celebrated the three men as heroes. They even signed autographs. A collection was set up to pay their legal fees. They would later receive minimal sentences for their crime. The Klan's combat against civil rights nevertheless seemed more and more like a lost cause, and its unpunished crimes would end up working against it.
We'll feel it.
In 1964, President Johnson pushed legislation to end segregation. In August 1965, 5 months after the murder of Viola Liuzzo, the president signed the Voting Rights Act, which banned all the systems set up to prevent black people from voting.
This law will ensure them the right to vote.
A century after the abolition of slavery, African Americans had finally achieved full citizenship.
When things happened, like the Klan bombed the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, there was an enormous reaction among white people. The very same thing happened when Viola Liuzzo was murdered by the Klan on the Selma to Montgomery March. And even Americans, white Americans, who weren't terribly progressive, weren't especially into integrating schools and so on, they reacted with a kind of horror. So I think that the Klan really is what absolutely guaranteed the success of the civil rights movement. It put first Kennedy and then especially Lyndon Johnson into a position where they felt they had to do this. They had to pass the Voting Rights Act. They had to pass the Civil Rights Act. So, you know, it was very ironic how it turned out.
The federal government began to seriously push back against the organization. As it had done with the first Klan a century earlier, they needed to neutralize its key leaders. Bob Jones, the Grand Dragon of North Carolina, and Robert Shelton, the leader of the United Klan of America, were summoned to Washington in 1965. They were questioned by a congressional committee. The Grand Wizards refused to provide the information asked of them.
It is not my liberty to divulge the membership of any member of the organization. I can state myself that I am a member, but it has to come from the individual himself if they want to admit that they are a member.
The Klan was declared anti-American. Its leaders were sentenced to a year in prison for contempt of Congress.
The government of this country I have respect, but the Justice Department I have no respect. The Justice Department has become nothing more than a bunch of babysitters for the Communist Party and the Civil Rights Movement.
Political pressure also forced the boss of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, to go on the offensive. The agency was already monitoring communists and civil rights activists, but now it had to target the Klan. Reluctantly, Hoover launched nearly 300 operations against the network. Klan meetings were riddled with moles. Suspicions rose to the point that Robert Shelton, the Imperial Wizard, planned to test recruits with a lie detector. the FBI also launched a less-than-legal operation called COINTELPRO.
It's short for Counterintelligence Program. We used that some in Iowa against the Black Panthers. We used it in Mississippi against the Ku Klux Klan. Very successful. It was, in my opinion, it was a good program.
They were mostly rumors or anonymous letters that, Miss So-and-so, do you realize that your Ku Klux Klan avowing husband is not attending Klan activities at all? He's going out with his girlfriend, your next door neighbor or something like that, to create hostility among the Klan members, to destroy reputations, and to make them ineffective in their political activities.
Yes, all you FBI agents want to check the Klan and investigate them. I live on 209 Mendota Avenue, Lexington, North Carolina, and my name is Roy Woodle, and I'm not ashamed to be a Klansman. Amen.
Some of the things that they did looked downright and literally cartoonish. The FBI labs draw up literal cartoons that would illustrate misdeeds of their leaders, and then they would turn them into postcards, and they'd mail them out to hundreds of members saying, do you know what your leaders are doing after you go home from the meeting at night? Do you know what your leaders are doing with your money? These tended to be crudely drawn cartoons. They weren't elaborate. They tended not to be drawn in color, so they were kind of black and white drawings. It would show a sheet being lifted up off of someone's head and says, someone knows who you are. So it would be trying to build up anxiety within Klan members by saying that you're being watched, you're being monitored, and you could be exposed at any time.
Under pressure from federal agents, the Klan, which had 15,000 members in 1967, lost 70% of its membership in the early 1970s. Times had changed. The culture of impunity was over. In 1971, Bill Baxley was appointed Attorney General of Alabama. He decided to reopen the investigation into the bombing of the 16th Street Church in Birmingham. Soon after, he began receiving threats.
I received letters, threats, and nasty letters from the Klan and groups like them from all over the country. I did get one nasty letter saying that I was persecuting white patriots by doing this investigation. They demanded an answer to this letter they had sent me, the Klan, and I said my reply is, kiss my blank, 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 except I didn't put blanks.
Despite the threats, Bill Baxley continued the investigation. Hoover, the FBI boss, was dead. Certain classified files finally resurfaced. The Attorney General quickly got back on the case of Robert Chambliss, Dynamite Bob. To convict him, the Attorney General managed to track down a key witness, Curtis Glenn, a woman who was in Birmingham the day before the explosion.
It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and she saw a car in that alley, and she saw 4 white men, and she knew something wasn't right, and so she wrote down the tag number of that car. And the next morning, when the bomb went off, she called the FBI, and they carried pictures out to her, and she identified Robert Chambliss.
In 1963, this church in Birmingham, Alabama was bombed and 4 black girls were killed in the explosion. Now, 14 years later, a criminal indictment has been returned in the case, and the white man indicted is 73 years old.
Bill Baxley managed to get Robert Chambliss sentenced to life in prison in 1977, 14 years after the crime.
Certainly, we know, Chambliss wasn't in it by himself. We know who else was in it, and you just have to take them one step at a time. But we will go back and get new indictments against the other people, and we will have other trials.
Families of the victims of the little girls were ever able to say it was a good day. It couldn't bring back their children, but it was at least some sense that finally, justice may have been delayed, but it wasn't denied.
White power!
From our factory.
Fellow Klansmen, fellow white people. It's good to see all of you here tonight. Good to see everybody from all over the country come here to stand up.
By the 1970s, the Klan had shrunk to a few thousand members, most often people who were marginalized or excluded from the system. Money was tight. An unusual new leader managed to give it a fresh start. David Duke founded his own group in Louisiana, the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. The young leader even ran for the Senate. This imperial wizard turned out to be a media wizard as well.
We need a voice for our heritage, ideals, and interests. It's only fair if things are to be evened up a bit.
We do need a real voice for the majority. Let's elect David Duke Senator, District 16.
Duke wanted to give the Klan a respectable front and to break with its inflammatory past.
Now, I think most of what you call the Klan atrocities and so forth, I think most of it is a media creation, a Hollywood creation. The Klan is becoming a political organization. We're becoming a political movement.
Oh, I think he's the greatest. They don't come any better. He's great in every way.
David Duke initiated this idea of a new and different Ku Klux Klan. So it was Duke who talked, for instance, about taking off our robes and our conical hats and so on and putting on business suits like other business people. So Duke attempted to, and to some extent was successful in trying to kind of reposition the Klan as a responsible organization. We don't hate black people, we just love white people.
The American white people are searching and are reaching out for a movement to carry forth their ideals and their values, the dreams that they carry in their hearts. And the Ku Klux Klan is that movement.
Duke's choir boy looks concealed a dangerous revisionist and a fan of Hitler. Despite his popularity, disputes within the organization sidelined the rising star of the American far right. David Duke left the Klan in 1978. He managed to make the racist organization more acceptable, but terrorism was still part of the Klan's DNA. In November 1979, in the working-class city of Greensboro, North Carolina, a group of left-wing activists protested against the creation of a united racist front between the Klan and the American Nazi Party. Cars full of Klan members and neo-Nazis arrived. Shooting broke out. Several cameras filmed the crime. In just 88 seconds, 5 anti-racist activists were killed. Despite this massacre, and even though they had been captured on film, the murderers were acquitted by a jury. At the beginning of the 1980s, the Klan had once again managed to thwart justice. Robert Shelton, who was still in charge of the United Klan of America, was unmoved and continued to spread his hateful message.
The Negro today is nothing more than an animal as he is living in our society, riding in the streets.
It took until 1981 for a case to bring an end to this long period of escaping punishment.
Early morning, March 21st, 1981. On Herndon Avenue in Mobile, Michael Donald's body is found hanging from a tree. He had been beaten, strangled, his throat cut 3 times.
19-year-old Michael Donald was chosen at random. 2 Klansmen were looking for a black man to kill as revenge for the murder of a white police officer.
This was the classic definition of terrorism, right? It wasn't merely killing a man because you hate the man or whatever it may be. Michael Donald's murder was a message to all black people in the South. This is what will happen if you dare to resist us, to resist white dominance.
The FBI finally arrested the murderers following a 2-year investigation. Henry Francis Hayes and James Tiger Knowles. Hayes was sentenced to the electric chair, Knowles to a life sentence. A white man sentenced to death for killing a black man. This hadn't been seen in the South in generations. But the victim's mother, Viola Donald, wanted to go even further. She contacted a legal defense group for victims of discrimination.
Michael Donald case became extremely famous because a lawyer named Morris Dees and the Southern Poverty Law Center filed a civil lawsuit against the Klan group itself, not merely the individuals, as well as the leader of the Klan group and the actual killers, and basically made the argument in civil court that the Klan should be held liable for the criminal actions of its members, that they had in effect been pushed to do this, that the organization itself had been a part of it. And the end of the story is that ultimately the jury agreed, and they levied a fine of $7 million against the United Klans of America.
What this did, in effect, was bankrupt United Klans. So Robert Shelton had to give up the whole compound he had built up that became a retreat space and an organizational space for United Klans. And in effect, the killing of Michael Donald put United Klans out of business. It became a landmark legal approach to how do you target effectively terroristic groups like the KKK.
The verdict was historic. 7 years after her son's death, Viola Donald finally got justice. The main Klan organization was bankrupted. Like so often in the United States, the most efficient way was to go for the wallet. All of the property belonging to the United Klan of America reverted to the Donald family. Robert Shelton lost his kingdom.
I don't have any comments, just move the police and I'm fixing to go home.
Though the United Klan had been convicted, the Ku Klux Klan itself had not been outlawed. Freedom of expression and association guaranteed by the American Constitution made sure it had a permanent outlet. Gradually, the Klansmen traded in their hoods for military gear and swastika tattoos. They linked up with neo-Nazis and all sorts of right-wing militias. Powerful ties bound them together: white power and anti-Semitism.
Beginning in the 1970s, you began to see explicitly Klansmen working with neo-Nazis. And it was at that time, in the 1970s through the 1980s, that this idea that the country was run by Jews came to be accepted all the way across the radical right. So the narrative came up that the federal government was Zog, the Zionist-occupied government. And it's that really symbolizes these movements coming together. So now today, when you see a big demonstration by the radical right, very typically you will have Klansmen and Nazis arm in arm marching together.
Their goal is to purify the white race and create a future for white children. Basically, they want their own state. They want to have an all-white sovereign state inside of the United States. Their goal is racial purification.
After decades of violence, power dynamics had changed. The collusion that used to exist between the court system, the police, and the Klan was no more. Now it was impossible for the Klan to openly recruit in town without drawing out its opponents.
I'm Ku Klux Klan, born, bred, and raised redneck Klan. Back in your holes.
They mainly indoctrinated people through the internet. When it came to taking action, they began to rely on a new strategy, the lone wolf. On April 19, 1995, in Oklahoma City, a car bomb went off and destroyed a federal building. There were 168 deaths and nearly 700 wounded. It was then the deadliest terrorist attack to ever occur on American soil. The terrorist was Timothy McVeigh, a former soldier and former member of the KKK. He had only 2 accomplices.
That's a very dangerous thing because from the point of view of law enforcement, it is far easier to find out about a plot and stop it before people are killed when it's a plot that is being hatched by 10, 12, 14, 15 people, right? I mean, the chances of that getting out, somebody telling, you know, a woman in a bar who's bragging or whatever it may be, are far higher. If you have one person who really knows what's going on and who keeps his mouth shut, it's almost impossible for law enforcement to find out about that in advance. So, you know, the kind of terror we're seeing today as a result of all of this is much more scary. It's much more difficult to stop.
You have domestic terrorists and you have international terrorists. And so right now, the domestic terrorism in our country, in America, is starting to be as bad, maybe worse, than foreign terrorists.
Timothy McVeigh was sentenced to death and executed in June 2001. In the 2000s, the American justice system finally began opening up about the country's sinister racist past.
NBC News in depth tonight, almost 40 years after the crime, deliberations in a murder trial that became a terrible symbol of race hatred in America.
Several classified cases were dusted off. Robert Chambliss's accomplices, who killed 4 young girls during the church bombing in Birmingham, were arrested and convicted.
Millions of Americans remember where they were when they heard that 3 civil rights workers had been found dead in Mississippi.
Edgard Killen, one of the murderers of the 3 civil rights activists in Mississippi, was sentenced to life in prison. At last, the winds of change seemed to be blowing over the United States. The election of Barack Obama in 2008 seemed to confirm this trend.
When President Barack Obama was elected president
blew me away. I thought it would never happen. I thought I would never see that during my lifetime. It was a big shock to me. One of the happiest days of my life.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
For the Klan, the election of a black man into the White House was a sacrilege.
When Obama was elected, I'm sure their heads exploded. But they spent the entire next 8 years just attacking and belittling him, the Imperial Club. He actually wrote a poem for Obama, and it was like, niggers on the front lawn, niggers on the grass, you know, time to say goodbye to Obama's nigger ass and stuff like that. Like really negative racial rhetoric. And, you know, we found it hilarious.
The Obama years stirred up white supremacist hatred. 8 years after his election, the backlash was severe. In 2016, Donald Trump was elected after leading a populist campaign based on fear of immigrants and a promise to make America great again. The far right supported the candidate and saw in his election a major victory. Obama had tried to unite, but Trump was able to divide and play on the fears of a segment of white America, a fear fueled by demographic forecasts.
Our Census Bureau has predicted that within about 25 years, white people in this country will become just one more minority. They will sink to below 50% of the population. And this has driven this racial panic in this country, the idea that white people will be just like brown people, like black people, another minority. And it's out of that whole idea that white people are being dispossessed. The country that we white people built for our posterity, our white children, is being stolen from us. And so this has ultimately culminated in the idea of a white genocide, that white people are being killed or replaced.
Today, the Klan and other xenophobic groups are growing again. As has always happened when white supremacists have felt their dominance threatened. Threatened by the slaves, freed after the Civil War. Threatened by mass immigration at the beginning of the 20th century. Or by the end of segregation. Although they are fortunately less frequent than in the 1960s, racist crimes and violence continue to be committed. In 2017, in Charlottesville, Virginia, a confrontation broke out between anti-racist activists and white power supporters. A white supremacist took his car and drove it directly into the crowd. A young woman was killed and 19 people injured. Other crimes continue to occur. In May 2020, George Floyd was arrested by white police officers. He was murdered in broad daylight in front of witnesses filming the scene. America was up in arms. The fields of racist hatred appear to be as fertile as ever in the United States. Active Klan membership is today estimated to be close to 6,000. But white supremacist groups have diverged into an infinite number of organizations. 150 years later, America has failed to cast out its old demons.
There's a lot of work that has to be done in this country to make things better for all people. Sometimes I wish there was another Dr. King.
I think the story of the Ku Klux Klan is a part of the American story, but it's a very disgraceful part. We must be vigilant to try to stop it as soon as it rears its ugly head.
Laws were changed as a result of the civil rights movement, but we're still having the fight in this country about whether the real America is a white America or the real America is a multicultural or plural America.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. We're gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land.